So the polls are in. Canadians, brace yourself. Because guess what? According to China, you are the worst country in the world. Congratulations. I am so proud of you. That's right, the Chinese government has polled their citizens, and apparently they think that Canada is the worst country in the world. You must have worked so hard to get here. Anyway, I'm gonna explain why, but for you non-Canadians watching, like myself, don't worry, just keep watching. You're gonna find out where your country falls on the list too, for countries that China either likes or hates. Because guess what? They've been ranked. So here's the deal. Polls like this are pretty uncommon in China. But when people like me are constantly using data from groups like Pew Research or Freedom House or other groups that give us very nicely compiled data to graphically represent the ranking of nations and their performance in the world, like for example, showing that China scores a 9 out of 100 on the World Freedom House Index, one of the lowest scores in the world, and while Taiwan is, never mind. Anyway, China doesn't do polls very often. And you gotta understand why. China doesn't have freedom of press. So you can't just wander around on the street and ask people how they feel about something unless it's explicitly been sanctioned or put on by the government. So be very, very skeptical if you ever see videos walking around mainland China where people are interviewing each other or asking people how they feel about something, because this actually is completely illegal in China unless the propaganda department or government says you can do so. Anyway, China doesn't do these polls because in a one-party dictatorship, the truth and opinion of people actually doesn't really matter. In fact, it can be dangerous. It's best to rule with an iron fist and not give people a voice if you're trying to hold on to power. So I find it kind of hilarious when Pew Research and the other polls that ask people's opinion about China come out. China has to make their own, instead of allowing these research groups to poll within China. I mean, it's a simple solution, really. If you want people to trust what you're saying, you could allow them to do polls within your country. No, it's much better to control the narrative and set up your own research centers to make bullshit polls instead. And I say bullshit with a lot of confidence because of what I've managed to find out about this poll. More on that later. Remember, this is the country that is in the bottom 5 in the whole world for press freedom. So don't expect any non-biased actual data to come out of this country of pure deception. The Chinese government makes sure that it has a muzzle on everything and anything that comes in and out of its borders. So keep in mind, most of the internet's even blocked in China. Chinese citizens don't have access to websites like Twitter and YouTube and all these kind of things because they're blocked by the Great Firewall of China. And that is by design. That is so that China can control the narrative that its own citizens hear, and so that its own citizens don't accidentally say the wrong thing to the rest of the world. So yeah, if we look at polls, the world has not been too happy with China. Of course, the pandemic plays a big part in this because it turns out people don't like when you blame them for a pandemic that came out of your own country, most likely having escaped from a lab in Wuhan. But it's not just that. Committing genocide against ethnic Uyghur minorities and crushing any and all dissent online and releasing wolf warrior diplomats and millions of bot accounts that trash talk people on every comment section on every website, and stomping out anyone that has a different opinion, like this poor guy that just held up a sign that said "Down with Xi Jinping." Meanwhile, turning a free territory like Hong Kong into an actual police state, effectively making it a highly surveilled part of mainland China. Yeah, people don't like that. You look like a piece of shit bully when you do that. To make it simple, in Pew Research, these are countries with the majority of people that don't like China at the moment. You got the US, you got Canada, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, France, UK, Italy, Japan, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan, New Zealand, and actually many more. Countries that did make the list that like China are Greece, Singapore, of all places. In fact, not only do these countries have a negative opinion about China, but they've dropped from previously positive opinions on China. And that's the most important part. I mean, look at Canada. In 2017, most people looked at China favorably. And why wouldn't they? China's had a pretty deep connection with Canada when it comes to investment and business, and has a large number of Chinese people that choose Canada as a place to go when they decide to leave China. In fact, I've had many subscriber meetups in many places in a few different countries. And the one that I can distinctly remember where the majority of people were actually Chinese, the fans that showed up, was in fact in Canada. Like I said, a lot of people choose it as the place to go, especially those with money. I currently know a bunch of people that are leaving China, Chinese citizens that are moving to Canada, because they can't handle all the restrictions, whether it be on business or freedoms. But this may be very well one of the reasons that China has actually decided to hate Canada. Think about the brain drain. Think of all the talented, wealthy people that are leaving China to go somewhere better. It's not a good look, and it's also not good for the future of your country. Anyway, the Chinese response to these polls that are very much legitimate is to make up their own. Now, there's two ways we can look at this. Number one is China just makes up the results because the propaganda department chooses which countries Chinese people should like and which countries that they hate. This is the most likely scenario, by the way. Or we can play devil's advocate, the second outcome, and say that, okay, the polls are real, but they worked out with the result that the Chinese state wanted. Chinese media has been manipulating the people to believe this certain way, and it worked out. But I'm going to lean with the fact that all of this is just fabricated. So here it is. China's most hated country based on the results from Data 100. By the way, a Chinese company, a data company owned by Alibaba. Request equate. I think they meant quote. By the way, this website was only created a few years ago. And when I went to this data company's website, it leads me to believe that this is actually just completely fake. So after some digging, yeah, in fact, you can kind of throw this entire poll out the window. There's a lot to be learned from it because it means that China just crafted their own response. But if you look at this website, actually, they haven't even finished building it. This is supposed to be like a massively powerful data insight company, and it's really just a splash page that they didn't even finish building. It's in fact owned by Alibaba. It is just a web page builder. If you're going to build a website that was supposed to be housing all of this important China research data, would you say under your recent projects included over 2,000 plus UI components? Tivero eos et accusamas et justo odio dignissimos. You know, it's the crap, weird Latin looking text that they use to fill in websites when you're building one, like on Wix or Squarespace or whatever. I mean, to be honest, like, China's one of the most powerful countries in the world, and it throws the most money out of any country in the world at its own propaganda to try to convince you that it's like doing the right thing. You'd think that they do a little better than this. I mean, this is literally like a website builder that they pulled out of their ass to make up a fake poll because they want Canada to know that they hate them. That's how amateur this is. I mean, I'm not a freaking like computer forensics spy detective. It took me like all of 5 minutes to go back on the Wayback Machine and figure out the progression of how this website was built. I legitimately think that they made up a fake shell company and a website to have a landing page for people to go when they look this stuff up, like what I did when I researched this article. It's so obviously fake, it's not even funny. But again, it's more important why China wants you to think that Canada is the most hated country in China. So let's talk about that. Let's just pretend it's real. Data from across 16 cities, Canada, you are the worst. The worst country in the world, according to Chinese people. The funny thing is that Canada often gets criticized for being too soft on the Chinese government, meaning that they look quite favorable to China, capitulating to their whims. Hell, they even entertained, I'm not even joking, the idea of having an extradition treaty with the CCP. What in the actual... I mean, no joke, the idea of a free Western democracy deporting potential Chinese dissidents back to China under extradition? That's horrifying. Anyway, capitulating to China, I think, actually worked against them. Here's why. The CCP thought that they had Canada in the bag, when in reality, Canada still has to behave like a civil country with a rule of law and fair justice. Canada is a welcoming and polite country of immigrants. And when you play nice for all these years, and then, I don't know, chime up about how maybe genocide is bad or boycott the Olympics based on that genocide, then it all goes to hell. I can say this after living in China for 10 years, I get how the government operates. China doesn't actually respect the welcoming arms of Canada. China only respects bullying and power. In other words, they only respect other countries that don't take their shit. All of these years of diplomacy and taking the middle ground and extending the olive branch, and then, hey, one of the CFOs of Huawei, a Chinese company, breaks the law and Canada has to do something about it because, you know, they're a real country that operates fairly, in fact, too fairly, by allowing that CFO of Huawei that broke the law while under arrest to live in a mansion while China arbitrarily kidnapped 2 Canadian citizens. One was a friend of mine, actually. You know what you get after all that goodwill? You get bullied. You're the most hated country now, Canada. You're the worst. You're the lowest. The country everyone puts on their backpack so that they don't have to get judged as an American. In the eyes of China, you're the worst. You can apologize and champion the Chinese government all you want or pretend like you're on their side. But at the end of the day, you get walked on because it's more important for their citizens to hate Canada at the moment because it's not going in the direction that they want it to. This is all by design, you see. Canada looked weak to the CCP, and then they do things like boycott the Olympics, and they feel like they can bully them back into submission. They use things like racial identity politics and try to commandeer different protests and things like that to get on the sympathetic side of Canadian citizens. Honestly, I even get the feeling that Chinese people didn't even poll this way. In an actual poll by like Pew Group or whatever, if they were allowed to poll properly in China, I doubt that it would have even come out this way. But China gets to dictate who is liked and who is hated. So keep in mind, this article was written in English by the Chinese state, and they want you, Canada, to know that you're the most hated country in the world. China's really predictable too. I mean, you can tell when articles like this come out that say that Chinese people hate Canada the most, what they're actually doing is telling people that they should hate Canada the most because they're not behaving like China wants them to. And you'll also see it in other articles as well. For example, this one just came out that blames Canada for sending COVID, or at least the new Omicron variant, to China through a parcel. It came from Canada on a parcel. You notice that China can never find the origin of the coronavirus when it comes to them, but they can always find it if it comes from another country. Here we go, guys. Let's blame a Canadian package for Omicron in China. Couldn't be anything else, right? Anyway, who is the most liked? Well, actually, Singapore took first place. And lo and behold, they actually had pretty much the highest opinion of China as well. Kind of reciprocal, if you ask me. They don't give all the data from the poll, but it ended up ranking like this. Number 1 was, of course, China. You ask a Chinese person what their favorite country in the world is, they're going to say China. Number 2 was Singapore. Number 3 was Germany. This is about to change, by the way. Mark my words. Number 4 was France. Number 5 was the USA. So much for sworn enemy. China wants its citizens to hate America, but not as much as Canada, apparently. Number 6 was Russia. Hey, where's that eternal friendship and bond the authoritarian lovers are always talking about? How they're going to unify against the evil, evil West. Number 7 was the Maldives. Where is the Maldives come to play in here? I don't know. I guess it's heavily promoted in the tourism sector. They failed to mention the rest since the sample isn't actually published by this fake-ass data center. But they did go out of their way to say that the last place was Canada. The most hated country. Yeah, because you know what I think of when I imagine asking people about the worst place in the world? You know, if you go abroad, you ask people, you know, you always hear it when you go abroad. You're like, those warmongering Americans suck, but man, f Canadians. Canada's the f***ing worst. Such an asshole of a country. Yeah, I've never heard anyone say that. In fact, it's usually quite the opposite. This is all by design. This isn't all fun and games though. I think there's a really important lesson to be learned here. It's a lesson for all countries dealing with China that China doesn't craft the nuanced diplomacy and fairness that your country might do. It has a knee-jerk reaction and it uses childlike tactics to bully countries into submission. When they get mad, they don't have their representatives in foreign ministries say, "We hope to resolve this peacefully and work out our differences," like they do in most countries. No, the Chinese state threatens nuclear war. They designate countries for the garbage can of history, and they call other nations the gum on the bottom of China's shoe. Can you imagine Canada or Australia having their diplomats go out and say that they're gonna nuclear bomb China? Or call them garbage or gum on the bottom of a shoe? No, you couldn't imagine that. But that's how China treats you in your country. My takeaway here is, What makes our countries in the West strong is that we accept people from everywhere. It's not without fault, for sure. But in my opinion, the more Chinese, the better. If Chinese people want to come to my country and they can accept that people are allowed and in fact encouraged to have different opinions and can accept the laws and traditions of my nation and respect others, I accept them with open arms. In fact, this is our strong suit. I love that I live in a multicultural nation. We, in countries with open immigration, are strong because we have input and talent from everywhere, including China. And I think that we have to continue being that way. We'll always win if we're the place that people want to come to and express their freedoms and creativity. Where we lose is when we start treating the government of China with the same fairness and generosity as we do the people. The government of China doesn't represent its people. It wants to, it claims to, it dictates what they do, say, and think. But the Chinese government and all of its atrocities that it commits has conflated itself unfairly with the image of its populace. And when we treat them the same, the Chinese people lose, as well as all of us in the West. The rest of the world is trying to sort out issues to make life better and partnerships stronger. It's time that governments separate the two, the Chinese government and the Chinese people, and treat the Chinese people with respect and honor and open ears. And treat the Chinese government like it deserves to be treated, like a spoiled, bully child of murderous parents that should not only be kicked out of class, but expelled from the entire school. Due to the nature of my content, I've been getting demonetized quite a bit lately, so I wanted to say thank you to the people that choose to support my work on patreon.com/Laowinner86. I communicate with you guys every single day on there. It's a great way to support the channel and make sure we keep things going. Appreciate it.